Great fight coming up at women's bantamweight, and this is a division that really needed an infusion of talent. And listen, my favorite part of Fight Night Picks is going in and looking at these up-and-coming fighters that we get to see either popping up on the regional scene or finally getting their shot on the big stage. Jocelyn Edwards was one of those fighters just, 3 weeks ago. She had an opportunity to take on a very interesting test in Wu Yanan, replacing Bethe Correia. And we had the conversation in that prediction video, is Jocelyn Edwards as good as Bethe Correia? And it was one of those kind of head-scratching questions. Jocelyn Edwards definitely answered a lot of questions in that fight, because if you went back and watched her regional tape, she had a ton of power, incredibly aggressive, really nice kicks to the body, to the thigh, to the calf, and to the head. And that's one of those things that you don't really see established all that much in MMA. You see that the calf kick is in vogue, and that's the hot new thing. You don't really see a lot of thigh kicks because of the threat of the takedown. But still, if you look at Jocelyn Edwards' fight against Wu Yanan, out of her total strikes, 50% to the head, 26% to the body, 23% to the legs. And really, that fight against Wu Yanan gave you an idea of pretty much everything that Jocelyn Edwards has done on the regional scene. Less a knockout, really. So she did look great in that fight. I know in the first round, probably Wu Yanan won it, and we disagree on the way that we saw the fight.
I agree with everything that you've said so far about Jocelyn Edwards. And here's the thing. I do think she is one of those super prospects, if you will. Like, I see her as... She's not going to get the hype, of course, that Maycee Barber had, but I think skill level, she has a similar ceiling. My issue with the Wu Yanan fight is when Edwards looked good in that fight, she looked great. The issue is there was a couple moments, it seemed like in every round, where she just couldn't get a good read on her opponent, if that makes any sense, where Yanan would just be in open space kind of moving, and Edwards wouldn't do anything. She just kind of stand there and wait for her opponent to do something. I agree with a lot of what you said. Again, I like her volume. I like how dynamic her striking game is. She landed a beautiful front kick in that fight. She lands a lot of really nice head kicks as well. It's just she can get sort of caught off guard, where you can trick her with a takedown, and if you do mix it up a lot, I think there might be some holes in her game that we just weren't able to see exposed by Wu Yanan. But it's going to be interesting to see her development moving forward, because I do think Edwards just technically is one of the better strikers in this division, really in either division that she chooses to compete in, whether or not we do see her bantamweight or flyweight. I like her striking technique. It's just weird, because I expected her to have more pop in the end of her shots against Yanan. She does kind of set up her power strikes, and when fighters do that, you do expect that last punch to have a big, pop at the end of it. And for Edwards, she would land that big strike, and then she'd just kind of go back to playing the volume game. It's not that I dislike the striking of Edwards. It's just very unique, I guess. It's something that I haven't grown accustomed to, and it does worry me, because I'm going to compare everyone till the day I die to either Valentina Shevchenko or Amanda Nunes. Here's my issue with Jocelyn Edwards. She's a good striker, but I don't see her outstriking the good strikers in her division, especially at bantamweight. And on the ground, I think she's great defensively, but I would love to see her at least shoot for more takedowns. And if we do see that in Karol Rosa, I'm willing to jump on that hype train. I just think I need to see one more great performance from her until I am really dedicated.
So if we look at Jocelyn Edwards, she's trained a little bit. I know a lot of people were kind of like, what? She's trained in like Iowa? What was up with that? Because she's, of course, from... And I gotta do it again. Panama! So Jocelyn Edwards getting that big win for Panama last time out. But again, working or striking with Kings MMA. We saw her in the camp of the Shevchenko sisters ahead of their last appearance on the same card. So for Jocelyn Edwards, again, the striking's her bread and butter. Her takedown, defense, and offense has been a little bit, I don't know, it's a work in progress, I guess I should say. She's on the national boxing team for Panama as well. So, again, that's her strong suit. For Karol Rosa, coming out of Pahana Valetudo with names like Jessica Andrade. And again, we've seen it from Karol Rosa, her 2 fights in the UFC, the fight against Lara Procopio, who's also on this card. That was a split decision win. They went tit for tat pretty much all fight. Karol Rosa mostly dominated it. If you look at the numbers, they're really close, but Rosa really, kind of took the tide from the start, and it was a Rosa fight from there on out. And the nice thing that she did in that fight, it was just a lot of lands in combination. Then in the fight against Vanessa Melo, it was a lot of fluidity on the feet, but she mixed in the takedowns as well. Really put on a great performance in that fight against Vanessa Melo. The only thing there is, oh boy, how good's Vanessa Melo? Not that great. No. Not that great. So that's what I've got.
Okay, this fight's really interesting, because I do think the best version of this fight is a super high-level kickboxing fight, where Jocelyn Edwards is going to go out there, land good leg kicks, go to the body, really work in her different ranges of striking. Karol Rosa again, she's a phenomenal striker, but she has the size and the strength advantage. And I don't see her going for a lot of offensive takedowns. But she can just negate everything Jocelyn Edwards does by holding her up against the cage. And we even saw Wu Yanan was able to do that to Edwards. And that was really the only pause in the striking of Edwards. Again, she just had those sort of weird periods in her fights where she'll just kind of be stationary and wait for the fight to come to her. But she is able to be held up against the cage. And it's not to the effect of like a Carlos Condit, for instance, where like, oh, that's how you beat this person. It hasn't been that big of a glaring hole, at least yet. But Karol Rosa, with her size advantage in this fight, if they're about 50-50 on the feet, or even if Edwards is able to gain a little bit of success, I do see Rosa just being able to play the wet blanket game and hold her up against the cage to either A, get a rest for herself, or just to sort of cool down the striking of Edwards.
And you got to kind of talk a little bit more on the size advantage for Karol Rosa, because if you just look at the numbers, I understand what you mean, but if you just look at the numbers, height definitely falls to Jocelyn Edwards, reach certainly falls to Jocelyn Edwards. But Karol Rosa just has that low center of gravity, and especially with the stance that she has, she keeps her hands nice in front of her. She really throws. She'll go 1, 2, and then the low kick. She's always working that inside leg kick. That's a really good way to stop your opponent. I know with Procopio, didn't really work out all that well. And with Vanessa Melo, again, I've talked too much about Vanessa Melo to start 2021. We talked about her at length in the Sarah Morris fight. We picked it wrong because Sarah Morris decided not to wrestle. But Vanessa Melo is the Randa Marcos type where her hands are always out and she's always doing something. Like Cindy Dandois, that's the name that we always compared her to. But in that fight, again, Karol Rosa worked the takedowns to great effect and really put together a great game and really got people excited about a fighter that's just coming into her own at 26 years old. I know she has 16 pro fights and a fair bit of time off between some of them. I know if you go back and watch the fight against Giselle Moya and then the fight against Procopio, it was bang, bang. But then she took a lot of time off, about half a year between the Procopio fight and the Vanessa Melo fight. And if you look at Karol Rosa too and her record on the regional scene, and both these women, I should say that really, lost to Giselle Moya, so she has the rematch wins. Larissa Pacheco, that we know and love. Melissa Gatto, who, when are you going to fight in the UFC, Melissa? She's had so many fights booked so far. And for Jocelyn Edwards, again, her last loss coming to Sarah Alpar that has had a fight in the UFC that didn't go all that well. But still, she's taken on a decent level of competition. A little bit of an asterisk, but decent level of competition there. Obviously, the loss to Alpar against a really high-level wrestler in this division. So if we talk about the odds, Matt, in this one, Rosa opened a minus 205. She's now minus 203 for Edwards, plus 175, plus 168 or so on best fight odds. Tapology picks 797 of them so far. You got 58% on Rosa, with 88% of voters picking her to win a decision. I love this fight. Again, it's great to have women like this in this bantamweight division, just an added infusion of talent. It should be a great fight. What are your final takeaways here?
So, again, this should be a phenomenal fight. I like what you said about the leg kicks of Rosa, and I'm really curious to see, A, if there's enough power behind them to really accumulate on Edwards, and how the movement of Edwards is affected by those leg kicks. Edwards, she does like to move a lot on her feet. She will set up her strikes with her footwork, so it will be interesting, especially if Rosa's able to invest in them early. How is Edwards going to look in that third round? Because we did see her start to tire a little bit against Wu Yanan, so now you're adding the fact that you're fighting a much bigger opponent in Karol Rosa, who probably will be using her weight to kind of bring the fight to you and weigh on you a little bit. I like the long-term game of Karol Rosa, and I do like her in this fight. Now, here's the thing, little, side mark, if you will. Jocelyn Edwards is the higher ceiling out of these two. I just think her natural weight class is 125 pounds. I think this is one of those cases, like when Gabriel Benitez fought Omar Morales at 155 pounds, where you have a good fighter who's moving up into an unnatural weight class, and their performance will be affected a little bit by it. I like Edwards a lot at 125. At 135, I understand she's tall and rangy for the weight class, but against some of these fighters, they will be able to hold her up against the cage, I do think, so that's just something you should watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you look at Jocelyn Edwards, she's had fights at 25, she's had fights at 35. I think physically she looks great at 135 pounds. It's a tricky one to try and break down because she has a lot of muscle for this division, which isn't always something that you see. And I like the comparison as well. You know, we've had a lot of fighters that, you know, in certain opportunities, they have to move up a weight class, and it just does not work out. And then you have fighters that move down. I mean, Omar Morales when he fought Giga Chikadze,
he moved
and
down,
it does not work well. So for Jocelyn Edwards, again, very high ceiling. I like the volume of Carol Hossa, and I like the threat of the takedown here, and how well she can mix her wrestling in with her grappling, because she's a good wrestler, but a great grappler, and I think those hand in hand with the fact that she can volume strike, the power definitely sides with Jocelyn Edwards. We showed the highlight in the prediction video for the Wu Yan'an fight, and we put out the video of her fight against Pamela Gonzalez from back in July of last year. Go back and watch it, please, because the combination that she lands and the power with which she lands, the body kick stuns Gonzalez, who falls down, and that's the end of the fight. And it's amazing stuff to see. So in this fight, if Jocelyn Edwards is going to win, I don't think she's going to be able to out-volume Carol Hossa. She's going to have to hurt her and possibly finish her in this one. But for Carol Hossa, she can win a decision. She can win by submission. So we'll see what happens in this one. I'm ever so slightly siding with Carol Hossa, but I'm keeping my money in my pocket for this one. It is a pop and popcorn fight if I've ever seen one, and I just love the matchmaking in this one. So, Matt, we're both going with Carol Hossa to get the win. Really looking forward to this one. As far as this bantamweight division is concerned, Matt, at the top of the card, we have a great fight coming up between Alistair Overeem and Alexander Volkov. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.